Good evening. It's my honor and privilege to welcome you to the BW Businessworld Dialogue. Today we are talking to a leader, a nation builder, now an author. He's the chairman of a venerable private bank. He's on the board of a large management business school, and he hopefully will be an advisor to many large corporations, digital startups, unicorns, as his contract will allow, because he was the chairman of SBI for a long time. So I'm sure you'll see him in a new avatar soon. But today we are going to talk to Mr. Rajnish Kumar, the former chairman of the State Bank of India, now the chairman of a very large private bank in India. And today we are talking to him because he's turned an author. He's written a book that possibly is the most important book of this year, because it is about banks, it is about NPAs, it is about project management, it is about technology, it is about Fintech. So without further ado, let me welcome Mr. Rajnish Kumar, who really doesn't need an introduction to the business world. Let me first congratulate you on writing this book, Mr. Kumar, The Custodian of Trust, a banker's memoir. So welcome, congratulations, you're an author now.
Thank you, Anurag.
And I've read the book once, but as I said, I will read it second time, I'll give you critical input. But first of all, let me start by asking you, how have been the last 18 months for you, both personally and professionally?
So, my term with the State Bank of India ended in October 20, and this has been a period of COVID. And initially, the mobility was restricted, and it was a very difficult period for people like us who are accustomed to leading a very active life. But of course, there was relocation involved. So in December, I relocated to Gurugram, and then I was working on this book for some time. Parallelly, also, I took up some assignments like advisor to Batra alternate investment firm, and then to Bearings. So pretty all right, I would say, in the given circumstances. And even MDI Gurgaon has been keeping me and you busy. Quite often they have been holding the board meetings, strategy committee meetings. So I would say fairly okay, not as hectic as it used to be. But still I'm enjoying what I am doing currently.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar, and possibly that gave you time to write a book and a memoir. If you were as busy as you were during your chairmanship of SBI, possibly we wouldn't be having this conversation about the book. We'd be having a different conversation.
Absolutely.
Now, your book is called what it is called. Why this name? Why this book now?
No, one is, as I said, that the idea was planted in my mind much before. And then because during the chairmanship of SBI, it was not possible. So practically dropped the idea and then again revived it after my retirement. And as far as title of the book is concerned, of course, banking is all about trust. And being chairman of the largest bank, this title came to, it was a suggestion along with many other titles, but I liked it best. It captures the spirit of the book well. And that's how it all came about.
You start the book by saying the crisis. Your book is 3 parts. First is called The Crisis. Was it a Lehman Brothers moment for India? That's what you call the section, and then you go on to talk about trouble in the corridors of money. Can you build on this and tell our viewers just enough so that they are interested in reading the book and buying the book and diving deep into what's you are saying in the book?
Okay. I think what I witnessed during the last 2 years of my chairmanship was that there were, starting with the failure of ILFS, NBFC, and then it was followed by Diwan Housing, then we have trouble with PMC, quite a few other cooperative banks, and the largest was, of course, Yes Bank, which is the 4th largest private sector bank. So that's why I thought that the first chapter has to be around this. And Yes Bank, people used to ask me what happened, how was it rescued? And that is where I thought that this should be the first chapter in my book. because the subject is contemporary. There's a lot of curiosity amongst people to know about the Yes Bank rescue. And that is where I captured that what was happening in the financial markets and system. And really, when ILFS failure started and other NBFCs, quite a few of them, started facing trouble, many analysts, many people, they used to ask me, are we going through a Lehman Brothers movement? So that's how this chapter heading came. And of course, with some deft handling and maneuvering by the Government of India, by Reserve Bank of India, by providing liquidity support, many other measures were taken. So at least we were able to avert a full-blown crisis as far as the financial system in India is concerned. You know that because of contagion effect, even one bank's failure can lead to huge crisis. And as far as banks are concerned, Cooperative Bank is still, it does not cause so many problems, but a bank like Yes Bank, its failure could have huge repercussions for the system. So that's how I thought that I should start with the contemporary topic, which has huge interest as far as the common man or general public is concerned.
So Rajnish Kumar, we'll stick to your book and what's in the book, but I'm tempted to ask you two questions. One, we're talking on the day when the Government of India given an extension to Mr. Shaktikanta Das, and you credit the RBI also for making sure that the crisis could be handled in a deft way. What is your commentary on Mr. Das's tenure as the Governor of the Reserve Bank of India?
We need continuity, and as a governor in last 3 years, because of his openness and his actions, he has brought the stability to the financial system and the confidence in the financial system. And we are at a very crucial stage as far as the Indian economy recovery is concerned. I think it is a very, very good move by the government to maintain the continuity as far as the central bank is concerned.
Which I'm asking you upfront, I could ask you, and you talk about how to deal with non-performing loans. You talk about how you became a YONO bank, or you implemented the YONO vision, which is technology. You talk about baptism by fire. You talk about your SBI split. But one of the things that you talked, because you talked about ILFS, you talked about DHFL. Now, I mean, after your tenure, Shrey also happened in August, September. And, you know, the way RBI took over DHFL. Now, the financial services business is very different than a steel business or businesses. So when you take over, when the RBI takes over, the haircuts become very large because, you know, suddenly the business goes away. Because if there is 3-6 months of uncertainty. So do you think the RBI can do better, or we as stakeholders in the financial system can do better in how we handle the bankruptcy of financial services companies, NBFCs? Do you think we need to have a different playbook there?
There is a bill pending. You would be knowing this FRDI bill, because there was resistance for particularly relating to one clause, what is called bail-in clause. And because of that, I think probably it has gone into cold storage. And but otherwise, there is no proper resolution framework as far as the financial sector entities are concerned. So it's important that a resolution framework for the financial sector entities is put in place. But in the absence of proper law or a mechanism, what RBI has been doing, that they are taking recourse to what is Section 227 of the Companies Act, and then exercising their powers to put an administrator into place. So whether it is a steel company or it is a NBFC, when the institution is in trouble, then the possession from the existing promoters has to be taken. and an administrator has to be put in. Now, about the haircut, like any other institution, ultimately the recoverability from the assets, that is what is required, and a faster resolution is in everybody's interest. So to that extent, I would not distinguish between a normal bankruptcy or bankruptcy of any other entity or a financial entity. Rather, resolution of a financial entity could take more time. But at the same time, purpose of putting them into administration is to preserve the value of the assets. Because if they're in the hand of the existing promoters, who in any case have failed the enterprise, then it defies logic if they continue to be in possession of the enterprise. So possession has to be necessarily taken away, and then administrator does the job, and most of the time there is an advisory board also. That mechanism is also put in place, and the recovery or the reverse of it, the haircut, would all depend upon, in case of a financial entity, what has been their quality of lending and what does their asset book look like. And depending upon that, any new bidder would place a bid, and the secured, unsecured creditors, they have to take a haircut. So it is inevitable. By whatever way you pursue it, it is inevitable.
That there will be some loss in value. And to be able to retain the ship, we'll have to do that.
So but, the trick is that faster resolution and early stage reference. Rather than referring it when it is too late, an early stage reference and faster resolution. These are the two things which can enhance recovery for the creditors.
Thank you so much, because there's nobody better than you to comment on that. Now, the title of your book is The Custodian of Trust. But some people in India see the bankers as villains. And you've tried to hit that nail on its head by having this chapter, non-performing loans are the bankers' villains. So why don't you talk a bit about what's in the chapter and what's your experience? And do you think it's unfair to call all bankers and paint all bankers with the same brush?
Yeah, exactly. That was my purpose, because always I find that media, the papers, the TV channels, they all are criticizing bankers. So the point which I put here is that yes, there is a certain amount of responsibility at the doors of the bankers. We cannot deny that. But at the same time, for each and everything, if you blame the bankers, that is not the right analysis of the system. Bankers work in an ecosystem. And when the ecosystem fails, then what does a banker do? And that is where in this chapter you will find that I have given 2 examples or case studies about the power sector, that how the matters go on and on and on in the courts. The inability of discoms to recover the money. There are huge under recoveries and ATC losses. So ultimately what happens is that all these losses gets passed on to either a power producer or eventually to the banks. And there have been many judicial interventions that also impacted the viability. And so we are working in an ecosystem, and for the performance on the NPL front, on the quality of the lending, it is important that the ecosystem shows an improvement. And it is in nobody's interest to keep on criticizing the bankers. So it has a negative impact. What happens is that bankers go into shell. And then we talk about that bankers are risk averse. So you understand from bankers' point of view that day in, day out, you are accused of incompetence, you are accused of wrongdoing, you are held responsible for the NPLs in the system, as if only bankers are responsible. So the responsibility has to be shared by all the players in the ecosystem. So that is the point I.
And why do you say, Mr. Rajnish Kumar, that the battle continues? What needs to happen in the future so that these bankers who have all good intent become really custodians of trust in the way you describe it in the book?
So the battle continues means we are still not completely over the hump as far as the NPLs is concerned. One is we have COVID-19 situation, so that has also created some problems, particularly on the retail and SME NPA. Corporates, fortunately, during this period, there is not much accretion to the NPAs. But there is still continuing cases in NCLT or resolutions are working, new cases will come. That is part of the banking. You can't eliminate NPLs from banking. So that the issue around NPLs continues for the bank. And one good step, hopefully a good step, is around aggregation of NPLs, where National Asset Reconstruction Company has been incorporated and is being or will be operationalized very soon. And the other issue is around the quick resolution, which can happen. One is that legally I see that a lot of work has been done, and as in when there is a situation where amendments to the law are required, government has acted very promptly and done the necessary amendments. The bottleneck is at the bench level. Tribunals are now still under staff. There is full strength is not available. So the quality and the quantity both matters as far as the tribunals are concerned. And if government is able to do that, then I think we will have a proper and a faster resolution. And banks also, they have taken a lot of steps in terms of improving their early warning systems, their monitoring of the loans, monitoring of funds. So as I said, it is an effort which requires a lot of action on the part of the bankers and a lot of actor on the part of the other players in the ecosystem. But eventually we have to realize that ultimately, if there are under recoveries from the customer in any sector, then there is a trouble, there is a problem. So when you say battle continues, it means don't lower the car. It's a message to the bankers also.
Absolutely. They have to reinvent. They have to in some way recalibrate to this new environment which has new challenges and technology. Technology is both an opportunity. I'll bring in Ms. Vasudha Mukherjee, my editorial colleague, into the conversation. But let me ask you my last question before I bring in Vasudha. Now, in your chapter 2, you talk about how you made SBI a technology-led bank, the YONO bank, from a legacy-owned bank. And in the part 3, you talk about the struggle and strife years of SBI, right? I think in the part 3, you talk about it. So tell us, a lot of people say banks won't exist in 5 years, 10 years. These fintech companies will become the new banks. What do you have to see? Do you think these behemoths, I mean, SBI is India's largest bank. Do you think SBI will be able to become a new fintech? Do you think that's possible? You started a journey which has done well, but do you think will the butterfly bloom in its full capacity?
Yeah, absolutely. Because as far as fintech or banks are concerned, this question very often keeps on coming. So when the developments which are happening all across the world and all across the sectors, not only banking, whether the way you commute today, your transport aggregators, the way you book hotels, hotel aggregators. So we are into an economy of aggregation. Everybody is becoming an aggregator. So the legacy banks also, they will have to become a platform or an aggregator, in the sense that the existing form or the organization structure, they would need to undergo a change. But there is an advantage with the existing banks. One, it enjoys customer trust. Again, I'm coming to the trust. When it comes to money, trust becomes very important. And there is a trust as far as the existing banks are concerned. Their customer base is huge, but the ways in which they do business, that has to go a complete transformation And that is where what happened with the State Bank of India, that today is the largest fintech in the country. I can say that without any hesitation. It is the largest fintech in the country with 4.5 crore users, and
Yes.
the
It's very
GMV,
big. Scale is very big.
very
But how
big.
do you become asset light? How do you become people light? Because we can say in case of SBI, there's a legacy. So overnight it can't happen. But some say that you got to take a clean break, because the new players don't have those issues. They don't have your scale, but they will get there in some time.
No, they will grow, and our country is very big. Economy is growing, so there's a place for everyone. But the legacy banks, as we call them, they have to also protect their turf, and they have to be lean. The decision making has to be faster. They have to. But one advantage with them is that they have the capability to invest in technology. Investable resources are good as far as the banks are concerned. And they are becoming light. Just for a small example, when the merger of the banks happened, 6 banks got merged into SBI. The headcount was 278,000. Today it would be around 240,000 or a few thousand here or there as well. So over a period of time, the staff or the headcount keeps on reducing. So that means that there is a productivity gain as far as the staff is concerned. And so every organization, whether it is bank, and I said that every organization in every sector, they all are aware of this fact that they have to use a technology. The advantage with fintechs is, because now I am chairing a fintech board, because they don't have the legacy, they have to start from the clean slate. So for them to conceptualize and then put into place any application, it is much faster. Legacy bank, because the systems are not designed for the new age technology. When core banking in the banks were put in 2001 or 2002, mobile banking was non-existent. And today, it's all about mobile banking, not even internet banking. And if a fintech today, when they are designing their system, they start with how will it look on mobile banking, how will the transactions would happen on mobile banking, and then go backward and then develop the system. In case of a legacy bank, it is the other way. You have the system, you want mobile banking, but you have to then reconfigure your existing system. So that way, fintechs definitely have an edge, both in terms of conceptualization and faster execution.
Mr. Kumar, we at BW Businessworld every year do a India Bookless Business Literature Fest in Pune. So hope to see you as an author talking to audiences in Pune. If the dates match, we'll invite you. And I want to congratulate you on your book. It's very honest, it's very real, it's very anecdotal, but it's also balanced. So it does honestly accept some of the criticism that comes, and you've tried to explain why all of it is not fair. With this, I'll hand it over to Vasudha Mukherjee for the next set of questions and to take it forward. Vasudha, you and Mr. Rajnish Kumar.
Thank you, Dr. Batra. And thank you, Mr. Kumar, for joining us today on BW Businessworld platform. I was listening to your conversation, and it does kind of feel like you have covered a lot of the ground of the book. But nonetheless, I'm so happy to be speaking to you today. It's such an honor, really, to speak to someone who was kind of like, we were all there. We saw all of this, from demonetization to, of course, the COVID pandemic. You were there for what seems to be some of the biggest historical moments of India, and giving us this sort of, background view of what was going on was quite amazing. I mean, you compared it to the Lehman Brothers, and I remember seeing a documentary on the 2008 crisis, and then reading your own when you talk about the demonetization, about how you, on 16 November, when you found out, to me, there was a lot of similarities between those two moments of watching some of the interviews there and listening to your own experience. So I would like to hone in on the demonetization a little bit. It seems like you found out more or less around the same time that all of us did. And I think that was a very shocking thing for me as a reader to do, because we always assume that you would know, the banks would know. because you are in the way, like we are the customers and you are the business, so to speak. But that's not the case. And I'm sorry, it might sound like a very simple question, but why is that not the case? Why were you not informed about this much far in advance or prepared for it? What kind of system? Like, please give us some of the review on this.
I think when you're talking about demonetization, and I mentioned it also, it has to be completely confidential.
Yeah.
And if confidentiality is broken, then there is a chaos otherwise. And that is where the problem is. When a decision of this nature is being taken, where you have to maintain complete confidentiality around it, then the time for preparing for it or sharing it with a larger group, that is not possible. And even if it is shared with very few people, suppose on the top, then even then, what would be the problem at the ground level? It is difficult to envisage in an exercise of this magnitude. So that's why so many logistical challenges came. And you can't plan it. That is the problem. If you can plan it over a period of time, somewhere the information will leak. The more people you get involved in this exercise, and then the information cannot remain confidential. So demonetization cannot be done after putting people to a notice that in next 3 months we are going to demonetize. It can't happen like that. And then do a very detailed plan. That is my reading of the situation, and I think that is what happened.
It's amazing that you can still hold that viewpoint after being put in the kind of situation and having gone through all that chaos during that time. But hindsight is 2020. So I know confidentiality is important, but do you feel, because everyone has opinions about demonetization, do you feel that anything could have been done maybe differently in that situation from your end, from RBI, from how it was all handled?
As you're saying that in hindsight there can be so many things. I mentioned also the ATM. So what if the size of the new currency was the same? So you would have not changed the cassettes. So these are small things. But otherwise, what if only 1,000 rupees was demonetized? Because then the impact or the inconvenience to the public would have been much less. 500 rupees note is very much needed for doing transactions. So there are many things, but I think now there is no point in talking about it. It has happened.
Right. All right. We can obviously move on. There seems to be, like, in your own tenure as chairman of SBI, so many different I don't want to call it chaos, but so many big events have happened. You had to rescue, you did rescue, Yes Bank. There's also the story with SR Steve. And SBI, those are definitely feathers in your cap. It definitely made SBI stand out. They're amazing feats. Do you think you maybe have set a precedent that next time something goes wrong, people are going to turn to SBI as the savior for the next, any issues are always ongoing. Do you think that's maybe the case now?
Sorry, I couldn't get your question, Vasudha.
Sorry, I was asking you that.
There's a bit of problem with the audio. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also possible with my connection. Internet is not as reliable as we all want it to be. But I was asking that, with so many feathers in your cap of rescuing so many different companies and banks, do you think that SBI sort of become like the go-to rescuer for the next time there's a situation like this?
Okay, I think because of its size and some sort of, we can say, expertise in banking. So whenever there is some trouble somewhere, I think there is no choice but SBI becomes a natural choice to handle the crisis. That is true. But as far as, say, for example, as far as future is concerned, I have argued it in my book also that we need a proper resolution mechanism. Right now, what happens, there is any trouble and the entire mantle falls on RBI, and then they have to, they have to look around, they have to find their suitor, they have to find somebody who can say. They're saying so. This task should be done more by an authority which has full powers to resolve the crisis or any institution which is showing incipient signs of failure, and a timely action by the authority. So it should be a fully empowered authority, and it should have the financial muscle and resources also to put in whatever is required, rather than telling SBI and Kotak Bank or HDFC Bank that like we need to put in this much money and then they shell out that money. This is not the, I would say, not the best way to handle the stressed financial entities.
Absolutely, and you do mention a lot about this when you talk about how policy making is very important, and how we need to be more active in making, not just like when there's a crisis, but like ongoing, we need to have these systems in place to make sure that there are people in charge, people we can turn to whenever something does happen. Because other than big crises, we do have small things going on every single day. And you also mentioned a lot of policies that you, not policies necessarily, but things that you also started in the company. Can you tell us a little bit, tell our audience a little bit about that, the kind of project that you, other than, YONO, you only need one, that was the big one. But can you tell us about some of the other initiatives you took during your time as a chairman to sort of ensure that, risk management would take place?
Yes. So there's one entire chapter about about the cleaning up of the balance sheet of the bank, recognition of NPLs upfront, providing for them even if that meant booking losses for a few quarters, and then most important about the credit risk management in particular, putting a very robust infrastructure, changes in the policies, and the other was, of course, digitization project, which is YONO, which has emerged as a very successful project, I would say. And today, if you speak to anyone, as far as banking applications, mobile banking applications are concerned, the first name would come to the mind is YONO. So it has done very well, and there are a lot of developments still which continue to take place. And ultimately, the intent of the board and the management was that anything relating to banking, you should be able to do on YONO platform, excepting disbursing cash. You can disburse cash from your mobile phone. Other than that, I can't think of anything which cannot be done on a mobile banking platform. So it becomes a bank in itself, a digital bank. The only difference is it is sitting within the main bank. Otherwise, it could have been India's first truly digital bank if it was sitting outside the State Bank of India. And in the book, there is I think I would call it the lengthiest chapter in the book is on the HR initiatives in the web. So for any organization or any organization's future, it all depends on the human resources. We are in this service organization. So there are processes, but there are people. And once you use technology, you fine-tune your process. But ultimately, you can't build an organization without having very appropriate, people-friendly policies. And that is a chapter, as I said, that it is the lengthiest chapter because a lot of work was done on the chapter. I am happy that the recent list which has come about the best employers in the world. So SBI from India is almost at the top 3 companies. So this is a good endorsement. And then there is a section 3 in the book which is all about a little bit about my personal life. So that is how the book has been arranged.
I did like that. I like that you started with the most attention-grabbing story in the book, and then the last chapter was completely different. It was more personal. It was more emotional, almost in a sense, and it was really wonderful to read that. And then you also had this. I also like because a lot of times with banks and with companies, anything that's making money or deals in money, we tend to well, as Dr. Batra and you were speaking about, villainize those entities. But then when you were talking about mergers in your book, and how Kerala was the only state where they kind of refused to go through with the merger because it was such a emotional situation for them. Can you expand on that a little bit? What is this interesting position that banks are in where they can so quickly become like this villain, and at the same time it's also something that is something so personal and private and emotional that you don't want to lose your bank or change your bank. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so naturally, that's why, because when 5 associate banks were merged, so maximum resistance came from Kerala, and then there was some interest in recalling in the assembly, and the matter went to the court. So that's why I thought that that perspective also needs to be shared with the public, and that's all. I have given some details what happened in Kerala. But any merger, yes, there are many stakeholders, and in merger of associate banks, the state governments, they were stakeholders. Then you have the staff of the people, and you have the customers. And then you should be able to satisfy all these stakeholders when you're doing an exercise like this. And it's also not expected that everybody would be on board in the first. But I would say that the resistance was not much. In other states, nothing. In Kerala, yes. But ultimately we overcame it. And then when doing merging the balance sheets is not such a big thing. You use a technology, all the tools are available. And for State Bank of India, fortunately, in associate banks, the systems were more or less the same. There were gaps, but bank had sufficient time to identify those gaps and to be prepared for it. The biggest issue always comes around how do you deal with the staff and how do you deal with the customers. So there is always every possibility that once merger happens, you will lose some customers. So customer communication and comfort to customers become very important. And staff, it is like it is a host and guest situation. So in this case, I would say State Bank of India was the guest institution, the host institution, and the merged banks, they were the guest institutions, the staff were. So it is absolutely essential that host makes the guest comfortable.
Right, of course.
There would always be apprehension that we are entering somebody else's house, how will we treat it, what will happen to our promotion, what will happen to our career, whether we will be transferred.
And also that's also where the distrust sort of comes in, right? Like, because as a customer, you're really worried about who this new host is going to be, what policies are they going to put in, even if they're not necessarily aware of all the policies, aware of all the ways the bank works. It's still having something new is so much more terrifying than having something that you already know. And so I just want to go back a little bit and say that you wrote this book, and it is called The Memoir of a Banker. But who were you hoping? Who was your, like, when you were writing this? Who were you writing to? Who were you hoping would pick up this book and read it?
So if you read this book, it can be read by everybody.
Definitely.
It could be of interest to the bankers community for sure.
Yeah.
It could be of interest to the students also, because I have shared that type of struggle I had to go. But it goes to the credit of State Bank of India, it goes to the credit of our country that even if you come without any patron, without any godfather, and still you can progress. So that is the message for the students, because still in largely our country, the people don't have enough resources. Lot of people, lot of students, they don't have enough resources. But it's a hope for them that if I could make it, coming from the background which I come from, then anybody can make it. So that way, country is a land of equal opportunity. That is what I believe. Despite we may be grudging, but I think there is an opportunity for everyone. And Surely on the basis of merit and talent, one can rise in this country and be successful. So this book, in that sense, it is not an academic book, limited only to the, the bankers or, and so common man also will find a lot of interest in this book. So I always wanted to read which is widely read and not necessarily only by the bankers.
No, but I mean, honestly, it read like a movie to me. Like when I was reading it, I was like, I can see this on screen because, and maybe that can be a next step because it does, like, it's such an important time in our history, not history, even in our present. And there's also this great part where you actually wrote down a note, I don't want to say notice, but like this lovely letter to your employees and reminding them of the values of STEPS and strong ethics, and you also talk about the kind of impact it had on your employees. What prompted you to write that?
So naturally, like whenever and whoever, when you're in first day in office, you want to establish contact with your people and then outline your thinking. Then what do you feel? And that has to be communicated. And so obviously the first step was to write this letter and to outline then what do I feel about the State Bank of India, what do I feel about the people, what do I feel about the issues, and what would be the pillars on which I intend to run the bank for the next 3 years. And that is where this acronym came in, and then it became part of the value system in the bank because we adopted steps with some modification around the last years after getting a lot of ideas from our people. And then finally it became our value statement for the bank, and it is very simple to remember. That is the best part to it, and that is the genesis of this communication. And I thought that it should be part of the book, and because this will also give that what is the thought process which was governing my tenure as chairman of the bank.
I'm really glad you did include that, and I also want to let our audiences know that if you are not the kind of person who maybe wants, and like actually Mr. Kumar pointed out, this book is not just for bankers. Anyone can read it. It's a lovely tale, actually. It's a story, and who doesn't love a good story? But if you are not really interested in reading about banking and all, I would say please go read this notice and this letter. I mean, I'm not really sure what to call it, but go read it first. I think it's not in the last chapter. It's not in the last part. It's in the second last part. Because it's just so well written, and it's definitely one of its kind, and it'll set the mood for the rest of the book for you. So please do that at least, because it's again, reading it myself, I was really moved. It was also a very emotional thing to kind of go through. And I mean, I just want to come down to the last bit. It's this question I'd like to ask. A lot of people come here, especially someone like you who has so much experience. Can you tell us a little bit about, your own professional and educational journey? I mean, you did talk about in the last chapter. I'm not asking you to give away the book, but a little bit about your journey and how you came to be the chairman of SBI and now an author.
Yeah, so it was a fairly long journey of almost 40 years. And the time in 1980, when I joined the State Bank of India, was very different. And there were limited job opportunities. The economy was a closed economy. We didn't have demand for engineers and MBAs or management professionals like we have today. And many IITians or even MBAs from IIM, they joined the State Bank of India's professional. So that time, as I say, was very different and limited job opportunities. And the first question for anyone who's coming from a middle class background would be to find a job and sustain life. So that is how it came. Not like today. Like today, my daughter children can afford to say no to any job because their parents are now today in a position to provide the kind of financial security they need if they want to pursue anything on their own. So
and a more open-mindedness, I have to add. Your generation has this open-minded where you're just like, well, I have to do this. but I've created a situation where you don't.
Yes.
Choose, yeah.
So, that's why we are living in a different world. But the journey was, as I said, exciting because the State Bank of India has always been the number one bank in the country. It has its own recognition, and as a state banker in the society, you command good respect. That I can see. So, in whatever job I was, I felt happy about it. And then the opportunity to work in different assignments. It is not like that you are working forever in one desk or one seat or one department. So it gives a variety of exposure in different areas. And then geography also, because every 2 years, 3 years, there are transfers. There is a demerit associated with frequent transfers. It's not convenient, but at the same time, your horizon widens. When you are living in only one place, confined to one place, and when you are moving around across the country or even overseas, then the horizon completely changes. You learn many new things. And then, of course, it was a step-by-step journey, accepting one. I got all my promotions in time. And as I said that I didn't have any godfather in the bank or anyone. So it just happened. I can say, but I enjoyed every day while I was in the state.
And you certainly made the most of it, because from what we read in the book, and I hope our audience also has a chance to go through it, because it really does. I mean, again, I will say it does feel like almost like a movie. You could probably imagine Mr. Kumar going through those motions. And then again, also the human factor is so strong and so well written. It was truly a pleasure going through it. I wish it would have been a little bit longer, actually. It ended too soon. And I just want to wrap this up by asking you like two more questions, which is, first of all, writing the book itself is also an experience. And, going through all those, memory banks of what happened. What have you learned through this experience of writing the book?
One experience is that I was wondering if there were no computers, whether I would have been able to write it. It has become much easier now, at least in arranging and writing the book. And then, of course, initially I was very, very hesitant, because I have mentioned also the acknowledgement that we are accustomed to writing office memos or dictating office memos. We are not accustomed to writing a story. But on the whole, as I said, that post-retirement, COVID situation where your mobility is restricted, so that was the best thing to do.
Yeah. Can we expect any more books or literature from you?
No immediate plan. Immediately, I am focused on this book. But after having written this book, this is more like a story about. But if I do ever write again, then it would be on a much more serious note and a serious note.
Absolutely. I think we would all be looking forward to that, because the book is really well written. It is very straight, and it's also very easy to read, which was very pleasantly surprising, and it was easy to get through. And I understood the whole dynamics. And again, it was such an interesting topic to begin with. So there's I think it will speak to a wide number of audiences, which is why I also wanted to know who you were thinking of when you were writing this. But yes, like you said, I think you accomplished your goal there about speaking to a large audience. And this is my final question, which I like to ask everyone, because even though you are a former chairman of SBI, today you are here as an author. So I'd like to ask you, what is your favorite book and what are you reading right now?
So because I have been so long in the financial services, and nowadays, in particular, I'm very excited about the startup world at Fintech. So for me, it would be very exciting to get associated with the fintechs and the startups in India. They are doing a phenomenal job. There are a lot of ideas, a lot of excitement, a lot of energy. And I have the experience, so it can be a good combination. And that was what I was thinking when I joined Bharat Pay on their board as the chairman of the board of Bharat. Well, it's a very energetic organization and it is a fintech. So that is one. Second is like I'm associated with some social work, like I'm on the board of Lighthouse Communities Foundation. Again, the organization doing phenomenal job in terms of improving the skills and confidence level of people or the young people who don't have a privileged background. They come from poor neighborhoods, slums, like that. So that is another, and third is spend time on all your interests. I am fond of sports, I am fond of reading, I am fond of spending time with my family. So all the three things.
The work-life balance.
Do some work with new age companies. Enjoy your life, personal life, and do some social work. So if it's a combination of three, and that is a very satisfying, I would say, life after SBI.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kumar, for speaking to us today about your book and about your life and about your values and philosophy. It was really great to have you here on our platform on Businessworld. If anyone wants to, listen to anything, you think they've missed anything, and they would like to rewatch this, the video is going to be available on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, all your social media friends, and you can go back and watch this. And please go ahead and read Mr. Kumar's book. It's The Custodian of Trust. It's for everyone, and it's about some of the biggest moments of India in recent history, in fact. And thank you, Mr. Kumar, for being here today. And we really hope to hear more from you. And if you do write another book, I really hope to speak to you about it again on this platform. No matter how serious it is, we can take it, we can handle it. And we would always love to hear more from you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.